So for nomination, you find this the provision on nomination in section 8 and 9 of the party list law. So when do you nominate? Each registered party may nominate not later than 45 days before the election, and they may nominate not less than 5 from which the party list representatives shall be chosen. So it's a list. So if you're entitled to one seat, the first one on the list gets it, so on and so forth. Who cannot be listed? One, someone who's listed in a different list already. So you could only be included in one list. The list cannot include any candidate for any elective office or a person who has lost his bid for an elective office. So this is the lame duck rule. Any restrictions on the list. No change of name or alteration in the order of nominees shall be allowed after the same has been submitted to COMELEC, except for when the nominee dies or withdraws in writing his nomination or becomes incapacitated, in which case the name of the substitute nominee shall be placed in the list, and that replacement will be placed in the last of the list. Section 9 provides for the qualifications. It reiterates the qualifications provided in the Constitution and adds some more. So primarily, natural-born citizen of the Philippines, registered voter, residency requirement of 1 year in the Philippines, able to read and write, and a bona fide member of the party or organization which seeks to represent for at least 90 days preceding the day of election, at least 25 years of age on the day of the election. But if you're representing the youth sector, you should be at least 25 but not more than 30 years. If you should attain the age of 30 during this term, you may finish this term. So the issue in this particular portion is on the part of the requirement or qualification that the member or the nominee must be a bona fide member of the party or organization. So we have several cases there, ang Bagong Bayani, Banat, Dayaw, and Abang Lingkod. In this year, we've only assigned Dayaw and Abang Lingkod as the relevant cases for the issue on nomination or who may be a nominee for a party list election. So the old rule in ang Bagong Bayani states that the persons nominated by the party list candidate organization must belong to the marginalized and underrepresented sectors. So you should be part of the group that you represent. In Banat, they altered it a bit. It is not necessary that the party list organization's nominee wallow in poverty, destitution, and infirmity. It is enough that the nominee of the sectoral party belongs to the marginalized and underrepresented sector. In the case of Dayaw, this case is about the LPGMA. So in August 2, 2012, COMELEC issued a resolution which required evidentiary hearings on the application. And when the COMELEC ruled on the application, the list of retained party list groups included LPGMA. Petitioners, in this case, who are dealers of different brands of LPG, lodged a complaint before COMELEC for the cancellation of LPGMA's registration. According to them, LPGMA does not represent a marginalized sector of the society because its incorporators, officers, and members are not marginalized or underrepresented citizens, since they are actually marketers and independent refillers of LPG. Well, in short, businessmen. In response, LPGMA stated that the Constitution does not require the party list representatives that must to be members of the marginalized or underrepresented. So how did the court rule on the requirement of being marginalized or underrepresented on the part of the nominee? The court said that the party list system of representation was crafted for the marginalized and underrepresented, and their alleviation is the ultimate policy of the law. Things changed under the case of Atong Paglaom in 2013. Atong Paglaom provided for two types of nominees. They may either belong to their respective sectors or must have a track record of advocacy of their respective sectors. So they don't always have to fall in the first category. You may not be exactly, for example, if you're representing farmers, you could be a nominee even if you're not a farmer, as long as you have a track record of advocacy for their respective sectors, meaning you have been advocating for their interests. The nominees of national and regional parties must be bona fide members of such parties. So another thing that was mentioned in this case is that parties shall not be disqualified if some of their nominees are disqualified, provided at least one nominee remains qualified. In the case of Abang Lingkod, which is actually an implementation of the ruling already in Atong Paglaom, the issue that was raised is, do you need to submit proof of your track record to represent a sector? So here they reiterated the fact that there are two types of nominees that could be listed under the party list system. So either you're a member of the sector or you have a track record. But are you required to submit proof of that track record? RA 7941 did not require groups intending to register under the party list system to submit proof of their track record as a group. What's the reason behind this? There is no logic in treating sectoral organizations differently from national and regional parties. It unnecessarily puts a premium on groups intending to register as national and regional parties. So you put additional requirements for sectoral organizations, requiring them to prove their track record, while there's no such requirement for national and regional parties. So the court said that it is not a requirement to prove your track record. Okay, we'll move on the third part, which is election and allocation of seats, which is something you'll find in Section 11 of RA 7941. Basically, Section 11 provides for the requirement of the 20% allocation, which you find in the Constitution. The second is the 2% threshold. Third, 3-seat limit. And fourth, proportional representation. The 20% allocation is computed with the formula number of district representatives divided by 0.8. This will lead you to the total number of members of the House of Representatives, and then you multiply that number by 20% so that you'll be able to get the number of available seats for the party list. Here on your screen is what a typical ballot for a party list election looks like. As you can see, it would normally occupy 60% of the ballot for election. Here we have 181 participants in the party list election. Used to be this was arranged in an alphabetical order, but since everyone started naming their party list with either something or anything that starts with letter A or a number, just so they could be included in the first column, COMELEC decided to randomly fix the party list in this order. So the issues in the cases in the allocation of seats revolves around the application of the second, third, and fourth rule, which is the 2% threshold, the 3-seat limit, and the proportional representation. The first part, 20% allocation, is pretty much simple. So what are the steps provided under Section 11? The first step is to determine the number of seats, which is the 20% formula. The number 2, once you have all the votes counted, you rank the party list from highest to lowest. And then determine the total number of votes cast for the party list. And then you qualify those who meet the 22% threshold. So how do you get the percentage? The number of votes received by the party divided by the total number of votes. That would be your percentage. So let us look at the cases under election and allocation of seats, which is veterans, Banat, and Philippine Guardian. Let's start with veterans. In the veterans case, This is a case about Pag-asa. It alleged that the filling up of the 20% membership of party list representatives in the House of Representatives as provided under the Constitution was mandatory. So why is there an issue here about the 20% allocation? Initially, COMELEC interpreted the 2% as a requirement for you to be able to get a seat, to be allocated a seat in the party list. You must have 2% and increments of 2%. But if you follow that, it would mean that the maximum number of seats that could be taken from the party list would be 50 because there are only 52% in 100%. So if you follow the 2% threshold strictly, there could only be 50 party lists, even if that there are 60 available seats. So it would make it impossible to fill the 20% allocation as provided in the Constitution. So here the conflict is between the 2% threshold and the 20% requirement. So what did the court say in veterans? So here the court said Congress was vested with broad powers to define and prescribe the mechanics of the party list system. Under a Republican and representative state, all government authority emanates from the people, but is exercised by representatives chosen by them. So they said, okay, Congress spoke and it decided that there is a 2% threshold because in order to be represented, you must at least have 2%. That's what it means to be able to represent in Congress. You must have the numbers. So in veterans, the court said that we must strictly comply with the 2% threshold, even if the 20% seat allocation will not be could not be followed. So the court clarified the steps in veterans, stating that first, okay, you rank and compute the percentage, and then you qualify those who meet the 2% threshold. So any party list who receives a 2% vote, at least 2% vote, gets one seat. And then after that, determine the first party as the one with the highest vote. And if that first party has 4% or more, it gets one additional seat. So that's 1 plus 1. But if the first party gets 6% or more, it gets 2 additional seats. So 1 plus 2, so that's 3. And then, of course, you apply the maximum. It's the maximum seat limit is 3. And then determine the additional seats for the rest of the qualified parties in proportion to that of the first party. So what is the formula for this portion, the additional seats for the other parties? The additional seats for a concerned party is computed by dividing the number of votes of the concerned party divided by the number of votes of the first party multiplied by the number of additional seats allocated to the first party. So if you look at this sample result of a party list, let's look at Buhay and A Teacher. Buhay is the first placer and A Teacher second placer. So since Buhay got 4.44%, it is entitled to, of course, one guaranteed seat. And since it's 4% or more, it has an additional seat of 1. So that's 1 plus 1 equals 2. So how do you compute the additional seats for A Teacher? Of course, A Teacher is entitled to one seat because it has at least 2% or more than 2%. So how many additional seats could A Teacher receive? This is the formula. 1,040,000 divided by 1,265,000. That's the number of votes of A Teacher and Buhay. And then you multiply it by 1, which is the additional seat given to Buhay. And the result is 0.82. And there's no such thing as a fraction or rounding off 4 seats. So no additional seat for A Teacher. So in this case, the only ones that got an additional seat would be Buhay, and the rest would be just one seat for guaranteed seat if they were able to meet the 2% requirement, which would be only up to Sibak. The next case is Banat. In Banat, the court was able to reconsider the effect of the ruling in veterans, wherein it is impossible to fill maximum number of seats if there are more than 50 seats available for party list. It frustrates the 20% allocation. So how do you compare veterans and Banat? So first, in veterans and Banat, both compute the 20% in the same formula as we explained earlier. Next step, you rank all the parties from highest to lowest, and then once you've ranked them and you've provided for their percentage, those who got 2% or more gets a guaranteed seat. So those rules are the same for veterans and Banat. The rules change for the next few steps. Under the veterans case, to get additional seats, you must meet the 2% requirement, this is the issue because this would mean you could not fill up all the 20% if there are more than 50 seats for the party list. So in Banat, the court said that you don't have to have the 2% requirement to get to have a share of the additional seats. And how do you determine how many additional seats you get? In veterans, the computation is based on how many additional seats were given to the first party. So we already saw that formula earlier. And in Banat, the additional seats are computed depending on the percentage of votes you got, and you multiply it to the remaining seats. So you are able to give seats to those, even to those who got less than 2% of votes. So Banat provided for a different formula wherein it's not focused on what the additional seats received by the first party. So what's the step in Banat? First, you determine the percentage of votes garnered. So as mentioned earlier, the percentage of votes garnered is the votes received divided by the total votes for party list system. And then you multiply that percentage to the remaining additional seats. What do you mean by remaining additional seats? It means the seats after the guaranteed seats have been given to those who met the 2% threshold. So in this case, who met the 2% threshold? It's from Buhay until Sibak, which is 13 guaranteed seats. So the first 13 party lists were able to give were given one guaranteed seat. So what's the formula now? So we have the percentage of Buhay is 4.44. You multiply that by, that's the percentage, by the remaining remaining seats, which is, if there are 50 seats minus the 13 guaranteed seats that has been given already, is equal to 37. So 4.44 times 37 is equal to 1.6428. In this case, Buhay will be entitled to one guaranteed seat plus one additional seat. And how do you compute for A teacher? Same. You look at the percentage of A teacher, which is 3.65. And then you multiply it by the remaining seats, which is 50 minus 13 or 37. And then you arrive at 1.3505. It means A teacher will also be entitled to one additional seat. So on and so forth until you're able to allocate to give all the additional seats. Moving on, we have the case of Action Magsasaka versus Comelec. So in Aksyon Magsasaka, this was the results of the election. So here, another example of how COMELEC, the steps taken by COMELEC. So once you have all the results of the election, you list them from highest to lowest and provide their percentage. So the third column, you'll see the percent of garnered votes. So Buhay, A-Teacher, Bayan, all the way to Ang Waray will get a guaranteed seat. So that's the first step. So everyone who got 2% or more gets a guaranteed seat. And then how many seats are left? Oh, so depending on how many seats are left, you will multiply the percentage to the number of seats that are left. And then that's how you will determine the additional seats. Of course, applying the 3-seat limit rule. So there. These are all the party list candidates who were able to get seats. So basically, in Aksyon Magsasaka, it implemented the rule in Banat in computing the additional seats. And it also provided that fractional seats are disregarded in the absence of a provision in RA 7941, allowing for a rounding off of fractional seats. Okay, moving on to the next case. The next case is Philippine Guardians, which tackles the rule on the listing. So in this case, there's a rule under the party list law wherein it provides that the COMELEC may, upon motu proprio or upon verified complaint of any interested party, remove or cancel the registration of any national, regional, or sectoral party organization if A, it fails to participate in the last 2 preceding elections, or it fails to obtain at least 2% of the votes cast under the party list system in the 2 preceding elections. So first is failure to participate. Second ground for being delisted is failure to obtain at least 2% of votes for 2 consecutive elections and 2 preceding elections. And the other one is also the same. For 2 preceding elections, you did not participate. But in this case, what happened is that Philippine Guardians for a year did not meet the 2% requirement, and the following year was not able to participate. And it was one ground after another. So is this already a ground to delist Philippine Guardians? According to the court, the word "or" is a disjunctive term signifying disassociation. So those 2 grounds are separate. It's either for 2 years you did not participate in the election, or for 2 years or 2 elections you were not able to receive the 2% vote requirement. Okay. So finally, after voting, after qualifying those who were able to get seats, you come to cases that are filed against the representatives or the party list who won and who has jurisdiction over that. In your legal case, you will see the jurisdiction of HRET as against the jurisdiction of COMELEC. These jurisdiction will be taken up further in the provisions on HRET. But preliminarily, in this case involving party list, the court said that HRET acquires jurisdiction over a disqualification case upon proclamation of the winning party list group, upon the oath of the nominee, and assumption of office as member of the House of Representatives. So as soon as someone is proclaimed, took an oath, and assumed office, the jurisdiction transfers from COMELEC to HRET. So upon proclamation, it's already within the jurisdiction of HRET. Prior to that, it is within the jurisdiction of COMELEC. So in this case, findings regarding the expulsion from the party touch upon the qualification requiring a nominee to be a bona fide member of the party list group sought to be represented. So in that case, If that particular nominee has already been proclaimed and took oath of office, the jurisdiction is with HRED. This is the end of our presentation. Hopefully, you learned something um, about the party list and how to determine who gets to a seat in the party list. And at the very least, you have an overview of the composition of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Of course, after this, you will take up how district representatives are chosen. So you'll take that up with your respective professors. Hopefully, you remember that when you vote for your senators and congressmen, you're voting thinking that these people will think for you, will decide for you how this country will function, where it will go in the next 3 or 6 years. So I encourage everyone who has not yet registered to register so that in the next election, there's a hope that we'll have a better set of politicians or legislators. I thank you everyone for listening.